Today, I want to talk about some defensive principles that will help coaches build your defense from the ground up. I truly believe that the best coaches are the ones who are able to understand all the options on the menu, understand their personnel, and then be able to craft and build a defense or a philosophy, a systematic approach to how we're going to play on the defensive end that they truly believe in. And if you don't truly believe in your defensive principles as a coach, your team's not going to believe in it either. If you don't put an emphasis and a priority on getting stops and doing the things that you say you're going to do to limit the opposing teams in the ways that you say you're going to limit the opposing teams, then there will be no follow through or very little carryover between what you say and what your players actually do on the court. So I think building from the ground up has some value. It's a mental exercise that I think a lot of coaches can go through as they're planning their seasons and starting to figure out what are the things we really, really want to be good at on the defensive side of the ball. So a few quotes to this point. It's not what you teach, it's what you emphasize. So we can teach things to our teams. We can explain things to our players, but do we emphasize it every single day? Are the things that you say are most important reflected in your practice planning? Do you allocate valuable practice time and minutes with your team to actually doing the things and becoming better at the things and laying the foundation for the things that you say you want to be really good at? And then in addition to that, the single biggest problem with communication is the illusion that it has taken place. Very rarely can we say something once and that point that we make sticks without having to reiterate it or repeat it or re-emphasize it by putting our teams in situations in where they have to learn both by experience and by what we say. And just because you taught it doesn't mean that they learned it. So kind of to the first 2 points, if we teach something, it doesn't necessarily mean that our team is going to become proficient at that skill that we're trying to implement. When building our defense, there are 3 really, really important questions. And I think these questions are fundamental and foundational to coaches building their defense from the ground up and really developing a system that they can believe in. There are a lot of great defenses out there, and there are a lot of ways to stop opposing teams, to build a system that can limit opportunities, limit high percentage shots, and try to lower the efficiency of the opposing team. I want to focus on one of these 3 questions today, but before that, I'm going to share a little bit of an intro to a clinic that I recently did in which I touch on a lot of these same points. Once we come back, we're going to look at this first question, which I think is the most crucial question of these 3. And it's really the head of the snake. It's the tip of the spear. It's the thing that is going to be the first line of defense for opposing teams when they're trying to get to the rim to score, to create high percentage shots and advantage opportunities. How are we going to guard the ball? What are your core principles? What is your teaching when it comes to guarding the ball one-on-one? Because regardless of if you play a no middle defense, if you play a pack line defense, if you play a forced baseline defense, whatever it might be, you have to guard the ball, even to an extent in zone. Sometimes you can have some smoke and mirrors, but if you can't keep the ball in front of you and the ball punctures that zone, you're going to be much, much less effective.
Talking about a little defense today. So for those guys that love shutting people down, maybe we can learn a few things together. I played 4 years of college basketball at the Division I level, was able to play professionally in Australia, Spain, Latvia, in the NBA Development League, and then going into my 5th year as a college basketball coach, about 90 minutes away from here at Lehigh University. So I know a lot of great coaches, high school coaches around today. So when you guys have good players, you need to call me, okay? when it comes to in terms of coaching, for me personally, I think a lot of the stuff that you guys have been talking today about in terms of the three-dimensional coaching definitely resonates with my story, my journey. You know, for me, coaching is something that exists beyond just winning games, just the scoreboard, but something that really is about developing leaders to the glory of God. So today, hopefully we'll give some practical application as to how we can be really excellent in building our teams, in helping our kids become the best possible versions of themselves. So when we talk about defense, there's a lot of different ways we can approach the topic. All right, we have, you know, there's a lot of different systems, well-known systems. The pack line defense. Who's heard of the pack line defense? Right, probably everybody. Who's heard of no middle defense? Okay, who's heard of, you know, different types of pressing defenses, 2-2-1, 1-2-2, diamond press. Okay, you have zones out there. So there's a lot of different ways to approach defense. And instead of talking today specifically about, well, you should run this type of system, you should do this, you should do that, I truly believe that the best coaches are the ones that are able to think critically, to adjust their system to their personnel, and ultimately are the ones who figure out, what do I really believe in as a coach? Okay, what do I really believe in as a coach? So today I want to try to help us answer three really basic questions. When you're building your defense from the ground up, you have to answer these three questions. How do we guard the ball? Where do we help? And what are we doing in transition? Okay, number one, how do we guard the ball? Okay, where do we help from? And how do we help? And then what is our plan for transition? Okay, so if you can get those three things down, as a coach, you can say, what's your name right here in the front? Yes, Jamie? James. If I have James, how do we guard the ball? And you can give me 20 seconds about things you know specifically. This is what we do at Mount Vernon. This is how we guard the ball. And then I go and ask one of James's players, and I say, I said, how do we guard a ball? And he gives me the same thing. Then you know that you have some kind of an alignment between what you're teaching and what your players understand and what they believe in and what they're able to tell you is true about your defense, your style of play, all that kind of stuff. All right, so another couple critical questions to think about, and then we'll jump into some on-court application. Okay, you have to know your nose. Know your nose. If you didn't get a handout on the way in, there should be a list of them. There's like 6 slides. Okay, so know your nose. What are the things that we are going to take away as a defense? What are the things that we're okay giving up? So what are the things we're going to take away, and what are the things that we're going to give up? Are we going to be a defense that gives up no paint? Do we give up no rhythm threes? Do we give up no layups? Do we give up no middle? Do we give up no baseline? Okay, all these things sound good, but what are the things that you're really going to be committed to trying to take away? So you got to know your nose.
Defense is the great equalizer. I think we have seen this time and time again. They say defense travels. Even as recently as the national championship game last year, Gonzaga versus Baylor, I think we saw Gonzaga as one of the most talented offensive teams in the country. Within the last, few decades. I mean, they were just blitzing people all year. But when they got on the biggest stage, I thought defense was the thing that turned the tide for Baylor, with their athleticism, their aggressiveness, their ability to disrupt the rhythm and the timing of Gonzaga's players. And ultimately, it led to a great outcome for them. And I just think that there's something to be said about defense, in the sense that the group can become the greater than the whole, because a lot of defense is just effort, consistency, togetherness, toughness, the ability to compete on every possession. And even if you don't play something like a pack line defense, there's a togetherness that is required and a mentality that is required that can really make defense a great equalizer in a variety of games. Even if you're going up against a more quote unquote talented offensive team. There's 5 basic types of defense. We have kind of a gap mentality, which has been made famous by the pack line. There's pressure denial defense, where you're more man conscious and less help conscious, and you're really just trying to disrupt the rhythm and the timing of passes around a perimeter, of spots on the floor where the offense wants to catch the ball. No middle and weak hand defense have risen in popularity these last several years with some of the success of college programs who run that style. And obviously we have zone and then pressing defenses, which isn't on here. I think as a coach, going back to first principles, is what gives us the best chance to win? What can be replicable at all levels of my program? And what's this kind of system are my players going to consistently get better in? And what fits our league, what fits my personality as a coach, what fits my core beliefs, and ultimately what fits my players. Just a few more points on what great defenses have, regardless of the technical schemes that you might employ. Great defenses have strong team identity behind them. There's very few gray areas. There's great accountability for players. They know their no's. They know what they're not giving up, and they know what you guys are okay as a team giving up. They're replicable. There's regenerative learning, where upperclassmen get better year to year playing in this same style or system of defense, and then they can help younger players as they come in and have to learn the ropes. This is I think defense, even more than offense, is very much based on a mentality of toughness and togetherness. And they're committed to great defenses are committed to core principles, which can be emphasized over and over and over again, measured. Are we successful at doing this? Are we not successful at doing this? And then ultimately, there are the core principles allow you to measure and lead to a high standard of performance, because you get the same reps every single day in practice, and you get the same reps every time you watch film, so on and so forth. 5 statistical categories that correspond with winning, and some research that's been done over the years. And, of these 5, obviously it'd be great to be elite at all 5 of these, but what will you be great at taking away? What are you going to be great at taking away? And this kind of leads to the next point of know your no's. So all these things sound great as a coach. Well, I don't want to give up any of these things. I don't want to give up paint, baseline, middle, rhythm threes, blow-bys, layups, high-lows, second shots, fouls. Fastballs is just kind of when teams have no pressure on the ball and they just zip the ball around the perimeter. But ultimately, in reality, there's limited practice time. There's limited time for on-court development. There's limited time gym space. There's limited time in the off season, right? So you're never going to become perfect at any of these things. What are you going to prioritize over the others? And that's a really critical question. That leads to this idea of the point of attack. How do we guard the ball? Every defensive system is based on keeping the ball in front of us, trying to stay out of rotation as a defense, trying to minimize the advantage that the offense has by puncturing the defense either on the drive, on the pass, or the ability to step out and hit shots. With the rise of the three-point shot, there's a lot of ways in which you can combat, some of the modern trends of basketball, but I don't think any is more important than if you can somewhat contain the ball and keep the ball in front of you and force contested jump shots that aren't at the rim and play without fouling, you are going to gain a great advantage for your defense. So we're going to go into a little bit of a presentation here about some of the core principles behind this point of attack mentality. How do we guard the ball? And then I'll come back and reiterate some of those points.
Regardless of what kind of scheme that you want to do defensively, we always are going to have to guard the ball. How many people know of a defense in which guarding the ball isn't a priority? Okay, there are none. So, all right, number one, when we're guarding the ball, the number one thing that the first thing we have to think about is how do we close out to the ball? Okay, how do we close out to the ball? So before we can guard the ball, unless we're starting here, okay, how do we close out to the ball? So when we close out to the ball, here are a couple teaching points, okay? There are 2 types of closeouts. One closeout is when I'm in help, and that's when I'm more than 2 passes away, okay? But the more common closeout maybe the one that doesn't get emphasized as much is the one when I'm closing out to the ball, okay, one pass away. Can I get one more player come down here? Go ahead, stand on the wing for me. Okay, so go ahead, stand on the wing. So, what's your name? Marcus? Marvis. Okay, and what's your name? Javen. Okay, so if I'm one pass away right now and I'm in help, okay, this is the closeout that doesn't get talked about enough. All right, so when the ball's on a wing, I'm one pass and help. Unless you're playing a denial defense, okay, most teams teach some kind of gap positioning. When the ball gets thrown out, here are a couple of things we want to teach. Okay, number one is we run first and then we chop. So run first and then we chop. Okay, that's the first point of emphasis. So the ball goes back. Okay, I go long step. Go ahead, long step, and then I start breaking down. Okay, some people will teach two hands up to take away passing vision. Here's what I would challenge you to think about. Does two hands up, okay, raise my level of my center of gravity and my level of positioning so that now, okay, the blow by is more likely. So we run first, we chop second, okay, we're gonna have one hand up because one hand, what we call the strike hand. Okay, this is what we call the strike hand. The strike hand allows us to still contest, okay, the shot. It also allows us to not come out of our defensive stance so that when the ball gets put on the ground, now we're in a better athletic position to be able to keep the ball in front of us. Okay, so run, chop, chop. We close out to the ball. Go ahead. Throw the ball. We close out to the ball. I'm in my athletic stance. Go ahead, stay here for a second. Okay, and then depending on where the ball is, okay, we want to think about two things. Close the space, create the space. Close the space, create the space. So if the ball's on an outside hip and I see a shoulder or I see a back, now we're going to close the space. If I see the ball, okay, in front of me and I see a chest, now we're going to create the space. Okay, does everybody understand the difference between those two things? We close the space when we see a back or a shoulder. We create the space when we see a chest. Why is that? Okay, because can he go by me if his back's to me? No, he can't. Now, if he comes to triple threat, come to triple threat. Okay, now, so I have my strike hand here to be able to disrupt shooting rhythm, a hand in the shooting pocket. Okay, but if the ball comes to a triple threat position, hey, now he's more likely to try to put the ball on the floor and beat me with the dribble. So we close the space, and then ball comes to a triple threat, we create the space. Go ahead, forward pivot, turn your back to me. We close the space. Go ahead, reverse pivot. We create the space. Run, chop, chop. Close the space. I have my strike hand. I see a back. I close the space. I see a chest. I create the space the entire time. I have my strike hand, which is active. Okay, the ball gets put on the floor. I try to arc the dribble. Okay, sometimes you can teach a soft arm bar, okay, in order to kind of control the dribble without fouling. If we put two hands in, automatic foul. But we can use that soft arm bar to try to arc the dribble outside of the lane. And then the final piece is when the ball gets picked up, go ahead. When the ball gets picked up and we're going to contest a shot, the other reason we use our left hand as our strike hand is why? Anybody got an idea? Why? Most people are right-handed, right? Right-handed shooters, strike hand was my left hand. Left hand's in the shooting pocket, disrupt the rhythm. The shot goes up, we leave the floor. I'm second to leave the floor. Hand above my shoulder, okay? And I'm reaching for the lights, okay? And that's how we finish. That's how we finish with a contest.
As we saw in some of those clinic clips, there's some core principles to guarding the ball that I think can be useful to a lot of coaches Depending on, regardless of the type of defense specifically that you choose to play, the type of tactical decisions that you make in building your defense from the ground up. Just to reiterate some of the points that were mentioned in that clinic video, to really break this down into its component parts, I think can be really helpful as you start to plan practice, as you start to figure out the times in which you are going to do player development throughout the course of the season. When things start to get busier, you start having scouts on opposing opponents. So there's a lot of things to consider. What are the things we're going to be really good at and committed to doing throughout the course of the year in terms of our player development, our fundamentals? And I think a lot of times player development gets automatically associated with offensive player development, but there's a lot to be said about being reminded of some of these techniques, some of these points of emphasis that will help your defensive ability to stay strong throughout the course of the entire year. So there's three basic components to guarding the ball. The first is just this arrival defense. So this is what we like to call, most coaches will call a closeout, but the closeout typically gets taught from 2 passes away, when you're more than 2 passes away or more, when you're in the help side position. So you are not in a 1 pass away defensive position. And I think that it's very, very difficult to play defense off of long closeouts when you're in help, say off of a skip pass, or you're the guy bumping the roller and the ball gets thrown out of a pick and roll, and now you have to recover to your man. This is the most difficult position to be in as a defender. The second type of closeout is this kind of short closeout when you're 1 pass away and you really are in somewhat of a gap or a help stance, and then you have to explode to the ball and guard the ball from 1 pass away. Are you able to keep the ball in front of you and create and not allow the offense to create an advantage from that position? Then we have the triple threat defense, which is just guarding the offensive player who has all 3 options, pass, dribble, and shoot, at his disposal as they've caught the ball and kind of go into their triple threat stance. They've established their pivot foot. We have to be able to keep the ball in front of us, especially in these second type of situations. There's going to be enough times when we are put into closeouts that are going to be really difficult. We have to be able to guard the ball in triple threat. And then the third kind of basic situation to this idea of guarding the ball is off the dribble, whether that's in transition or somebody has a live dribble within the half court. That's another scenario that we have to think about when we're building our on-ball point of attack defense. So our arrival defense, this is the closeout defense. Whether you're 1 pass away or you're in help side, you have to explode to the ball. So we call this moving on airtime. That means as the ball is being released, we anticipate the ball being passed to our man, and we start moving simultaneously or even slightly before the ball leaves the offensive player's hands, so that we can arrive on the catch, and we explode to the ball so that when the offensive player catches it, we are there almost waiting. That's the ideal situation. Very difficult to do, but if you can learn to anticipate passes to your man, you're going to be in better starting position to guard the ball, as opposed to having to run out at the offensive player. And then it's much more difficult because the offensive player now has the advantage of your momentum moving out towards the perimeter and their momentum trying to take them towards the rim and getting ready to try and attack and get a paint touch, get all the way to the rim, whatever it might be. In long closeout scenarios specifically, but even in short closeouts, we teach this idea of running first and then chopping your feet. So long strides, sprint steps, long strides and sprint steps until you get, and this is different for each player depending on their level of athleticism, who they're closing out to. Maybe you have a scout specific, where one guy's a better shooter than the other. So you're going to close out a little bit shorter, a little bit longer, but the same basic idea is the same, that you're going to run first and chop second as you approach the ball in your closeout in this arrival defense. Once you arrive on the ball, you really want to be active and not reactive. You want to have that strike hand, which we teach as the left hand. You saw that in the clinic presentation. And that's because most shooters are right-handed. So if you have especially your left hand active as that strike hand being disruptive in the shooting pocket, not allowing them to get into a rhythm jump shot or a rhythm three. That's one of our no's here at Lehigh is no rhythm threes. People might shoot threes, but they can't be in rhythm. Then we kind of teach this boxer stance. If you go toes on toes, if you try to square up your defender, I believe that you're going to have less of an ability to influence the ball where you want the ball to go, and more, and the offensive player is going to have more of an ability to go either direction. If you can anticipate the way and direction in which you're able to influence the ball, now you're able to really keep your opposing teammates and the entire defense out of rotation. So this boxer stance kind of goes hand in hand with your strike hand, in the sense that you have active hands and active feet on the ball, so you're ready to move, but you're also trying to contest and disrupt the rhythm of a player who might pull up and shoot a jump shot. So we tell our players no rhythm threes and no blow-bys. And a blow-by is just, when somebody is completely dusty off the dribble and you need emergency help from your teammates. This is really difficult to do, really, really difficult, especially in modern basketball with a lot of 4-round-1, some 5 out. A lot of teams run 5 out now. So there's a spacing and pace, and the ability to play on a perimeter and shoot the ball at a high level is making defense more and more difficult. But we say, we're going to ask you to do difficult things because winning is difficult. And so if you're able to do these things, you're going to play. Now we move to the second idea of guarding the ball. The second situation is just off the triple threat. So triple threat defense has many of the same principles, but now we just add a few more elements to how can we be aggressive and active on the ball and not reactive? How can we influence the offense to do the things we want them to do, as opposed to allowing them to dictate where we go and how we're playing defense and our rotations, and they're just starting to spray the ball around the court. Defense is a mentality, as we talked about before. So this boxer stance with your active strike hand and active feet is super important. And then the second part of this is that when you see a shoulder, a back, or the offensive player puts the ball over their head, you want to close the space. So if they turn your shoulder to you, if they turn your back to the defender, or they put the ball all the way over their head and they're not in triple threat, or they're not in a good triple threat position, I should say, then we want to close that space and make them really feel us as a defender. This allows them to not be comfortable, to not have vision of the entire floor, and to not be able to throw fastballs around a perimeter, which is just like in baseball. If you throw a fastball right down the middle, it gets there really quick. If you throw a fastball on a basketball court right into a shooter's pocket, it's nearly impossible to be able to rotate in time. So close the space allows us to be aggressive and active on the ball. Creating the space is the second part of this, and is the part that maybe gets ignored because we want to be aggressive. We want the defense to feel us, but we also don't want to get blown by. So when you see the offensive players start to turn their square up and turn their chest to the rim, if they start to hit you with a jab fake, or they have a live dribble and they start to go into some kind of a hesitation move, that means there's a really good chance they're going to try and take you and attack you off the dribble and try to go by you, or off the rip if they're in a true triple threat positioning. So we want to create that space while still remaining active with our strike hand. We want to create that space, and this is different for everybody. How much space can I give the guy while still keeping the ball in front of me? How much space can I give the guy without just giving up a rhythm three off a jab step, for example? So you want to create the space while still remaining active and in the defense's mind. So if they're thinking about you, there's a good chance that they're less inclined to think about what else is going on the floor. And we all know that basketball is a lot of decisions are made in split seconds or in a very short amount of time. So you want to be disruptive enough so that the offense can't just be comfortable and make those decisions while seeing the entire floor without any pressure on them. And then I just mentioned, as I mentioned, no fastballs means that no laser-like passes around a perimeter helps our defense get into complete their rotations more successfully. The final piece of this is guarding the dribble. We want to anticipate and try to influence the offensive player that we can as much as possible. There's a difference between influencing the offensive player and opening up our stance so that they can just drive right by us. Especially at the college level, there are less players that are as proficient with their left hand as their right hand if they're a dominant right-handed player. So anticipation has a big benefit for the players that are able to get really good at this skill. When the ball is coming at us, both off the triple threat and off the dribble, if our back foot moves first, we're able to try and absorb the dribble more successfully than if we just open up our top foot, so that now we've had to open up our hips and we're less we are not as able to keep the ball in front of us because we've opened up our hips, and that actually takes a lot of time. So if we can move our back foot first, try to arc the dribble outside of the lane, and then occasionally you can teach a soft arm bar with your inside hand while showing your outside hand to the referee. As soon as you go two hands on the offensive player, it's going to be a foul. But that's another technique that you can use to kind of arc the dribble outside of those kill zones, the paint, the 10-foot zone. Anything that's going downhill towards the rim is deadly for a defense. To finish up here with this idea of how do we systematize and really be technical about guarding the ball and helping our defenders and our players, giving them the best chance to be successful at a really, really difficult task, especially as the game of basketball becomes more about pace and space, and officiating becomes more about giving the offense an advantage. How can we do this the best possible way? And just, I think terminology is really important. Terminology, it shares meanings at a much higher speed than it does in terms of just having a single word or phrase that communicates a truth or a principle about what you want accomplished, the important points, the core principles of your defensive terminology and your philosophy that could be communicated quickly, especially in times in the heat of battle, whether that's in a game or in the middle of practice. So here's just a quick list of terminology that kind of we talked about. Run, chop, kind of applies to closeouts. Moving on airtime also applies to closeouts. Be there on the catch applies to closeout. Strike hand and guide hand. That applies to kind of when you square the ball up, whether that's in triple threat or that guide hand is that second hand that you would use with a soft arm bar as somebody tries to take you off the dribble. Boxer stance gives you active feet. If you can win with your chest at the mid-range, then you've done your job as a defender. If you start wide with your feet and move your back foot first, you're able to maintain that width and not get too narrow so that now you become off balance and less athletic. Active and not reactive. Aggressive mentality on defense is super important. Close space when you see a shoulder, a back, or the ball above the offensive player's head. Create space when you see a chest, or you can accept a jab, or somebody has a hesitation move. Arc the dribble when somebody puts the ball on the floor to try and influence the ball outside of the paint, outside of the elbows preferably. When you contest, jump second, reach for the lights with your strike hand, which is your left hand for right-handed players, and then no fastballs when you're on the ball. If you can avoid the offensive player zipping the ball around the perimeter, you'll give your defensive teammates opportunities to close out to the ball with more effectiveness. So now we're just going to go into kind of some practice drills and a couple of basic, fundamental practice drills that we do that we teach that can help you start to lay this foundation for your point of attack defense.
Ready? Go. Good. Close the space. Create the space. One dribble. Good. And then a defensive player goes to offense and everybody else rotates. Here we go. Let's get a couple reps here. Okay, when we close out. Good. Good. Just start. Go ahead. Go ahead. Good. Okay, throw the balls back.